Spanish royal family shocks. Iñaki is not the only father in Princess Cristina's children. Madrid, despite being considered a model husband and devoted father, Iñaki, the former Duke of Palma, is now embroiled in a shocking story. Sources close to him have revealed that he is not the only man who has played a fatherly role in Princess Cristina's children's lives. For years, Iñaki has worked hard to maintain a close bond with his 4 children, Juan, Pablo, Miguel and Irene, despite his bitter divorce from Princess Cristina. He has insisted that family ties are sacred and that he will never let the past tear them apart. However, the reality is not so easy. The time he spent in prison for a corruption scandal, combined with the breakdown of his marriage, left deep scars on both him and his children. Especially Irene, the youngest daughter, is said to have suffered the most. The young girl could not accept the separation of her parents, and according to sources from close friends, Irene gradually considered Iñaki to be the main cause of the psychological trauma she had to face. The image of a wonderful father in Irene's eyes faded, replaced by a feeling of disappointment, even resentment. But the story does not stop there. Irene has long since found another figure, a man warm, patient and steadfast enough to become a second father in her life. Sources say that this person not only supported and listened to Irene during the most difficult times, but also became a constant spiritual support for Princess Cristina. In Irene's eyes, he was the epitome of a father figure she could trust, someone who had never let her down or hurt her. The identity of this man remains a mystery, but his presence is raising questions about the true relationship between Princess Cristina's children and Iñaki. Spanish public opinion is heating up, with many wondering, is this second father simply a close family friend, or is he part of a larger secret involving the royal family's past? While the public is still waiting for an official response from the Spanish royal family, the story has been enough to stir public opinion and once again remind us that, behind the glittering palace lights, family tragedies can still smolder, and that sometimes, the truth is much more complicated than we imagine. Consistently. Over the months, the family began to close the painful chapters. They held family dinners, cooked together, and shared small stories. When the brothers talked to Miguel, they did not call him father but an affectionate nickname, which made the relationship sincere and unburdened. Instead of confrontation, the family chose to move forward together, each in his or her own role. The greatest lesson this fictional story wants to convey is not replacement, but the richness of affection. Families can expand without being lost, wounds can be healed with perseverance, and a father, or mother, can take many forms. Sometimes, one finds one's father not in blood, but in a hot cup of tea in the evening, an arm around the shoulder when scared, or an umbrella on the way home from the rain. As night fell on the imaginary palace, the lights in the living room remained warm. Irene stood by the window, looking out at the garden where Miguel was walking his little dog. She smiled, an imperfect smile, but a real one, and knew that, despite the uncertainties of life, she had a new anchor, a man who had no blood ties, but the heart of a father. The autumn days passed slowly. Yellow leaves began to cover the path leading from the gate to the small garden where Irene and Miguel often sat and talked. Occasionally, the sound of the wind blowing through the birch trees reminded Irene of the old autumns when her family was still intact. But the old bitterness was gradually replaced by a strange peace, a peace that came not from forgetting the past, but from learning to live with it. Miguel never tried to enter into stories that Irene was not ready to tell. Instead, he chose to stay by her side as a silent companion. Some evenings, they would just cook a simple meal together, a plate of pasta, some olive salad, a cup of hot mint tea, and watch old movies. Irene realized that normalcy was what she craved most after years of noise and arguments. One October evening, as the candles flickered on the dining table, Irene asked Miguel a question she had kept in her heart for a long time. "Are you afraid of becoming part of my family?" Miguel smiled softly, the gentle smile she was familiar with. "Scared. But I think, if I stay outside just because I'm afraid, I'll miss the opportunity to do something good. And if being here makes you feel better, then I'll stay." That answer made Irene's eyes sting. She realized that sometimes a second father doesn't appear to replace or take someone's place, but simply to fill the void left by time and pain. Her mother, Princess Lucia in this fictional story, also kept her distance from Miguel at first. After all she had been through, she didn't easily trust anyone who entered her children's lives. But she gradually noticed small changes in Irene. The usually grumpy daughter smiled more, the tense conversations lessened, and most importantly, her eyes became less dark. One day, when Miguel was fixing the hinges on the kitchen door, she brought him a cup of hot coffee and said simply, "Thank you for being here." Gradually, Miguel became an indispensable part of the small gatherings. Irene's brothers were initially wary, but they soon realized that his presence was not threatening. Miguel did not seek recognition, did not need a title, he just wanted to help keep the family from falling apart again. And then, on Miguel's first Christmas in the house, Irene decided to give him a special gift, a photo of the whole family, framed in a wooden frame she had carved herself. Beneath the photo, she wrote a few words. "Family is not just blood, but those who choose to stay." Miguel was silent for a long time as he received the gift. He was not good at expressing his feelings, but Irene knew, in that moment, that he had found his place, not in name, but in heart. That winter, the garden was covered in snow. And for the first time in many years, Irene felt that this roof was truly warm. Years passed. Irene was now 25, a passionate interior designer in the southern port city. She lived in a small apartment, filled with light and the smell of new wood, but every weekend she would drive back to the old house, with its birch garden, long wooden dining table, and a man still waiting patiently over a pot of mint tea. Miguel was older now, his hair was graying at his temples, but his hands were still as skillful as ever. He never talked much about his role in this family. For him, Irene's maturity, kindness, and happiness were the best answer. One early spring afternoon, Irene and Miguel sat on a wooden chair at the end of the garden. The chirping of birds mixed with the smell of freshly cut grass made the scene both familiar and like a memory painting. Irene took a white envelope from her pocket. "You know, this is the invitation to my wedding," she said, her eyes shining with a smile that was both eager and emotional. Miguel took it and opened it slowly. The invitation was delicately printed, the words "We respectfully invite you" clearly visible. He raised his head to look at Irene, but she was faster, continuing, "I want you to be the one to walk me down the aisle." There was a long silence. Miguel blinked, as if trying to hide his surging emotions. He was not Irene's biological father, but in that moment, he understood more clearly than ever that love did not need blood to be deep enough. "I would be honored," he replied, his voice low but warm. On the wedding day, Irene wore a pure white dress. When the music played, all eyes turned to her and Miguel. They walked slowly on the red carpet, the light shining through the glass windows, creating an unusually warm scene. In the front row, her mother smiled, her eyes shining with pride and gratitude for the man who had silently stood by her family through the stormy years. As he handed Irene over to her future husband, Miguel whispered, "You will always have a home to return to." After the ceremony, amid laughter and blessings, Irene sat quietly beside Miguel. She looked at his wrinkled face and suddenly remembered every moment, from simple dinners, to days fixing doors, to silent times watching the rain fall together. All of it had woven into a safety net, supporting her from the moment she was broken until she was strong enough to move on. And so, the story of the second father in Irene's life ended with a promise that was never written down, but would last forever, that love, once given with sincerity, will always find a place, whether in blood or outside it.